In the ancient age, when Dharma still breathed through the forests, rivers, kingdoms, and hearts of men, there stood the glorious city of Ayodhya on the banks of the sacred Sarayu River. Ayodhya was no ordinary city. It was vast, prosperous, disciplined, and beautiful. For its roads were clean and wide, its markets overflowed with jewels, grains, flowers, perfumes, horses, elephants, and fine garments. The houses were tall and decorated with flags. The people were truthful, charitable, learned, and devoted to righteousness. There was no fear of hunger, no fear of thieves, no fear of injustice. The city seemed like a reflection of heaven on earth. This great city was ruled by King Dasharatha of the Ikshvaku dynasty. The noble line of kings descended from the sun. Sanmatoer was brave, wise, and respected by all. He was a master of warfare, especially skilled in fighting from chariots. His name itself suggested his power, one who could control 10 chariots or fight in 10 directions. He had 3 queens, Kaushalya, noble and gentle, Kaikeyi, brave and beautiful, and Sumitra, calm and wise. Yet, despite all his prosperity, Dasharatha carried a deep sorrow in his heart. He had no son. A king may possess wealth, armies, fame, and power, but without an heir, his heart remains restless. Dasharatha was growing old, and the thought troubled him deeply. Who would continue the dynasty? Who would protect Ayodhya after him? Who would perform the sacred rites after his death? At last, after consulting his ministers and priests, Dasharatha decided to perform a great sacrifice for the birth of sons. Sage Vasishtha, the royal guru, advised him to invite the great sage Rishyashringa, whose spiritual power was immense. Rishyashringa was a sage of extraordinary purity. Because of his presence, rains came, crops grew, and prosperity returned wherever he went. He was brought to Ayodhya with honor. The sacrificial ground was prepared, sacred fires were lit, priests chanted Vedic hymns, offerings were made into the flames. The atmosphere became filled with divine energy. The sacrifice was called Putra Kameshti Yajna, the sacred rite for obtaining sons. When the yajna reached its completion, a divine being emerged from the sacrificial fire. His form was radiant like the sun, and in his hands he carried a golden vessel filled with celestial payasam, a divine sweet pudding blessed by the gods. He said to King Dasharatha, "Give this sacred payasam to your queens. By this, sons will be born to you." Dasharatha accepted it with reverence. His heart trembled with joy. He divided the divine payasam among his queens. Kaushalya received a portion, Kaikeyi received a portion, Sumitra received 2 portions. In time, the queens became pregnant. The whole city rejoiced. Auspicious signs appeared everywhere. The winds blew gently. Flowers bloomed. The rivers flowed peacefully. The hearts of the people became filled with hope. At the proper time, under sacred stars, Queen Kaushalya gave birth to a son. He was dark, like a rain-filled cloud, radiant like 1,000 moons, and peaceful like the depth of the ocean. He was named the Rama. Queen Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharata, noble and virtuous. Queen Sumitra gave birth to twin sons, Lakshmana and Shatrughna. The birth of the 4 princes filled Ayodhya with celebration. Drums sounded, conch shells were blown, lamps were lit, gifts were given to Brahmins, the poor, and the people. The city became like heaven. But Rama was not merely a prince. In the devotional vision of Ramcharitmanas, he was the Supreme Lord himself, born as a human being to restore dharma and bless the world. In Valmiki Ramayana, too, his birth is divine, connected with the prayers of gods who sought relief from Ravana's tyranny. For Ravana, the mighty king of Lanka, had become a terror to the three worlds. He had obtained boons from Brahma and could not be killed by gods, demons, Gandharvas, Yakshas, or many celestial beings. In his arrogance, he had ignored humans and animals, thinking them weak. Therefore, Lord Vishnu chose to incarnate as Rama, a human prince, and the divine forces took birth as Vanaras and allies who would later help him. The four princes grew like four shining flames in the house of Raghu. Rama was the soul of righteousness. Even as a child, he was calm, compassionate, disciplined, and deeply loved by everyone. His beauty enchanted the people of Ayodhya. His speech was gentle. His conduct was perfect. He respected elders, loved his brothers, protected the weak, and delighted all who saw him. Lakshmana was inseparable from Rama. From childhood, he loved Rama more than life itself. He would not sleep unless Rama slept. He would not eat unless Rama ate. His heart was bound to Rama in pure devotion. Similarly, Shatrughna was deeply attached to Bharata. The four brothers were different in temperament, but united in love. They studied under sage Vasishtha. They learned the Vedas, statecraft, archery, warfare, ethics, and the duties of kings. Rama mastered every art with ease, yet remained humble. His strength never made him proud, and his knowledge never made him harsh. Years passed. One day, while King Dasharatha was seated in his court, a powerful sage arrived. His presence was like fire wrapped in human form. His matted hair, blazing eyes, and majestic aura made everyone rise in respect. It was sage Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra was once a mighty king, but through intense tapasya, he had become one of the greatest sages. He had endured storms of anger, desire, rivalry, and spiritual struggle. His life itself was a journey from royal power to divine wisdom. Dasharatha welcomed him with honor and said, "O great sage, your arrival blesses my kingdom. Command me. Whatever you ask, I shall give." Vishwamitra replied, "O king, I am performing a sacred yajna, but demons disturb it again and again. They throw blood and flesh into the sacrificial fire and ruin the rites. I want your son Rama to come with me and protect the sacrifice." Dasharatha froze. Rama was still young. The king could not bear the thought of sending him into danger. He said, "O sage, Rama is only a boy. I will come myself with my army. I will fight the demons. Ask anything else, but do not ask for Rama." Vishwamitra's eyes flared. A promise had been made, and now the king was hesitating. Sage Vasishtha gently intervened. He said to Dasharatha, "Do not doubt. Vishwamitra knows what he is doing. Rama is no ordinary child. Let him go. This will bring great good." With a heavy heart, Dasharatha agreed. Rama, calm and obedient, accepted the command. Lakshmana, unable to remain away from Rama, went with him. The two princes bowed to their father, mothers, and Guru, then followed Vishwamitra into the forest. It was the first great departure of Rama from Ayodhya. The forest was vast and mysterious. It was filled with birds, animals, rivers, hermitages, and hidden dangers. As they walked, Vishwamitra taught Rama and Lakshmana divine mantras called Bala and Ati Bala. These gave them strength, removed fatigue, protected them from hunger and thirst, and increased their spiritual power. Soon, they entered a terrifying region. The air became heavy. The trees looked twisted. The cries of wild creatures echoed from the shadows. Vishwamitra said, "This land was once prosperous, but it has been ruined by the demoness Tataka. She is powerful and cruel. She destroys hermitages and kills the innocent. Rama, you must slay her. Rama hesitated for a moment. Tataka was a woman, and he wondered if it was right to kill her. Vishwamitra explained, Dharma is not weakness. One who destroys the innocent and lives by cruelty must be stopped. A ruler's duty is to protect. Understanding the duty before him, Rama lifted his bow. Tataka appeared with a terrifying roar. Her body was huge, her face fearsome, her strength enormous. She threw rocks, uprooted trees, and filled the air with illusion. The forest shook with her fury. Rama first tried to disable her, but when her violence grew unbearable, he released his arrow. Tataka fell dead. The forest seemed to breathe again. The sages rejoiced. Vishwamitra, pleased with Rama's courage and obedience, gave him many celestial weapons. These were no ordinary weapons. They were divine astras, each with its own power, spirit, and purpose. Rama received them with humility, and the weapons themselves appeared before him, promising to obey his command whenever remembered. Then Vishwamitra led the princess to his hermitage, where the yajna was to be performed. Rama and Lakshmana stood guard day and night. For several days, the sacrifice continued peacefully. At last, the demons arrived. Maricha and Subahu, terrible servants of evil, came with their forces. They filled the sky and began to pour blood and filth toward the sacred fire. Rama acted instantly. He released the Manava Astra at Maricha. The weapon struck him with such force that Maricha was hurled far away into the ocean. Rama then released a fiery weapon and killed Subahu. Lakshmana destroyed the remaining demons. The yajna was completed. The sages were overjoyed. Vishwamitra's purpose had been fulfilled, but he knew that Rama's journey had only begun. Soon after, Vishwamitra told Rama and Lakshmana about a great event in the kingdom of Mithila. King Janaka was conducting a yajna, and there was a divine bow there, the mighty bow of Lord Shiva. Many kings had tried to lift it, but none could even move it. Janaka had vowed that whoever could string that bow would marry his daughter Sita. Rama and Lakshmana followed Vishwamitra toward Mithila. On the way, they came to a silent and sacred hermitage. It seemed empty, yet filled with hidden sorrow. Rama asked, "Whose hermitage is this?" Vishwamitra told him the story of sage Gautama and his wife Ahalya. Ahalya was created with extraordinary beauty and had become the wife of sage Gautama. One day, Indra, king of the gods, deceived her by taking Gautama's form. When the truth was revealed, Gautama cursed Indra and also cursed Ahalya to remain unseen, living in a state of deep penance until Rama's arrival would purify and liberate her. The details of Ahalya's condition differ between traditions. In popular retellings, especially influenced by later devotional tradition, she is often described as turned to stone. In Valmiki Ramayana, she remains in the hermitage, invisible to others, sustained by air, performing penance. In Ramcharitmanas, Rama's touch brings her redemption in a deeply devotional manner. Rama entered the hermitage. As his feet touched that sacred ground, Ahalya was freed from the curse. She regained her radiant form. Sage Gautama returned, and both offered reverence to Rama. This episode showed one of the most beautiful aspects of Rama's nature. His presence did not merely destroy demons, it restored the fallen, purified sorrow, and gave dignity back to those who had suffered. The journey continued. At last, Rama, Lakshmana, and Vishwamitra reached Mithila. King Janaka welcomed the sage with great honor. Janaka was not only a king but a philosopher, a ruler established in wisdom. He governed without attachment and was revered as a Rajarshi, a royal sage. When Janaka saw Rama and Lakshmana, He was struck by their beauty and majesty. He asked Vishwamitra who these radiant princes were. Vishwamitra told him, "They are Rama and Lakshmana, sons of King Dasharatha of Ayodhya. Rama has protected my sacrifice and destroyed powerful demons." Janaka was delighted. Now the story turns to Sita. Sita was no ordinary princess. King Janaka had found her as a baby while plowing the sacred field during a yajna. She arose from the earth itself. Therefore, she was called Sita, meaning the furrow made by a plow. She was also known as Janaki, daughter of Janaka, and Vaidehi, princess of Videha. Sita grew in Mithila like grace in human form. She was beautiful, wise, gentle, strong, and deeply devoted to Dharma. In the devotional vision, she was Lakshmi herself, born on earth to accompany Vishnu as Rama. When Sita was young, she had once effortlessly moved the great bow of Shiva while playing. Seeing this, Janaka realized that she was destined for no ordinary husband. He made a vow: only the hero who could lift and string Shiva's bow would win Sita's hand. Kings from many lands came to Mithila. Proud rulers, warriors, and princes attempted to lift the bow. Some strained until their faces turned red. Some could not even move it. Some left in shame. Some became angry. But the bow remained unmoved. Janaka began to feel sorrow. Have I made an impossible vow? He wondered. Is there no hero on earth worthy of Sita? Then Vishwamitra asked that Rama be shown the bow. The great bow was brought into the assembly on a massive cart. It was guarded and carried with difficulty by many strong men. Its size and weight inspired awe. The hall grew silent. Rama approached it calmly. There was no pride in him, no display, no dramatic boast. He simply bowed in respect, took permission from his guru, and placed his hand upon the bow. In one effortless movement, Rama lifted it. The assembly gasped. Then he began to string it. As he bent the bow, it suddenly snapped in two with a thunderous sound. The noise shook the earth and echoed through the heavens. People fainted. Kings trembled. The gods rejoiced. Drums sounded in the celestial realms. Flowers rained from the sky. Janaka's face shone with joy. His vow had been fulfilled. Sita, holding a garland, came into the assembly. Her eyes rested upon Rama. In that moment, devotion, destiny, and divine love met. She placed the garland around Rama's neck. The marriage of Rama and Sita was decided. Messengers were sent to Ayodhya to invite King Dasharatha and the royal family. When Dasharatha heard the news, his heart overflowed with happiness. He set out for Mithila with his queens, ministers, priests, and a grand procession. Mithila became a city of celebration. King Janaka and King Dasharatha met with great affection and respect. The sages approved the alliance. The families rejoiced. Then Janaka proposed that not only Rama and Sita, but all four princes should be married in the noble family of Mithila. Thus, Rama married Sita, Lakshmana married Urmila, Sita's sister. Bharata married Mandavi, daughter of Janaka's brother Kushadvaja. Shatrughna married Shrutakirti, also daughter of Kushadvaja. The four weddings were performed with Vedic rites, sacred fire, mantras, blessings, music, and divine joy. The brides and grooms circled the fire. Gifts were exchanged. The people of Mithila and Ayodhya celebrated together. It was one of the most beautiful moments in the Ramayana. Four noble brothers united with four noble brides under the blessing of sages and elders. After the wedding, Dasharatha began the journey back to Ayodhya with his sons and daughters-in-law. But on the way, a fierce presence appeared. The earth seemed to tremble. The winds grew harsh. Warriors became uneasy. It was Parashurama, the warrior sage, incarnation of Vishnu's fierce power, destroyer of arrogant Kshatriyas. He carried his axe and bow, blazing with ascetic energy. He had heard that Shiva's bow had been broken, and he came in anger. He confronted Rama. Who has broken the bow of Shiva? He demanded. If you are truly powerful, string this bow of Vishnu. The atmosphere became tense. Dasharatha was frightened for Rama. The royal party stood silent. But Rama remained calm. With humility and strength, he accepted Parashurama's challenge. He took the bow of Vishnu and strung it effortlessly. Then he placed an arrow upon it. At that moment, Parashurama understood this was no ordinary prince. Rama was the very supreme power whose presence Parashurama himself served. His pride dissolved. His anger vanished. Rama asked, "This arrow cannot be released in vain. Tell me, what shall it take from you?" Parashurama surrendered his accumulated spiritual power connected with worldly movement and withdrew from the path of royal action. He praised Rama and departed to continue his penance. The way was clear. Rama returned to Ayodhya with Sita. Bharata returned with Manvai, Lakshmana with Urmila, Shatrughna with Shrutakirti. Ayodhya welcomed them with unimaginable joy. The streets were decorated with flowers and lamps. Women sang auspicious songs. Brahmins chanted blessings. Citizens filled the roads to see Rama and Sita. The city seemed reborn. King Dasharatha's heart was fulfilled. His sons were married. His dynasty was secure. His people were happy. For a time, Ayodhya lived in perfect joy. Rama and Sita lived as the ideal couple. Rama honored his parents, served his guru, loved his brothers, and cared for the people. Sita, graceful and devoted, became beloved by all. Lakshmana remained constantly devoted to Rama. Bharata and Shatrughna also lived with humility and affection. Thus ends Bala Kanda, the first great section of the Ramayana. But Bala Kanda is not merely the childhood story of Rama. It is the foundation of the entire epic. It tells us why the divine takes human form. It shows the birth of Rama, the coming of Dharma into world in visible form. It shows the love between brothers. It shows the role of the Guru, because without Vishwamitra, Rama's public mission would not have begun. It shows that strength must serve righteousness. It shows that compassion can redeem even the cursed and forgotten. It shows that Sita and Rama are not simply bride and groom, but the meeting of divine power and divine grace. It shows that true greatness does not announce itself. Rama never boasts. He simply acts when Dharma calls. In Valmiki Ramayana, Bala Kanda presents Rama as the ideal human prince, born with divine purpose, disciplined by sages, tested through action, and united with Sita through valor and destiny. In Ramcharitmanas, Bala Kand presents Rama even more openly as the Supreme Lord, whose birth, childhood, marriage, and every movement are filled with devotion, sweetness, and cosmic meaning. Together, both traditions give us a complete picture. Rama is human enough to inspire us, divine enough to save us, gentle enough to love, strong enough to protect, humble enough to obey, perfect enough to worship. And Bala Kanda is where that journey begins.